Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Hikigai Studio Conversations, where we bring together leaders shaping the intersection of technology, business, and human purpose. At Hikigai, our mission is to amplify visions and also amplify visionary voices, innovators who are not just building companies, but they're actually reimagining how industries evolve through intelligence, empathy, and impact for health. Today is a very thrilling day for me as well to have been joined by Dr. Ganesh Padmanabhan, founder and CEO of Autonomize AI, and a company at the forefront of redefining healthcare with intelligent, autonomous systems. His journey from a small town in southern India through a global career spanning engineering, enterprise tech, and entrepreneurship is nothing short of inspiring. And I should congratulate him because we've just heard wonderful news that they've been, featured as one of the top 50 in media, and that's wonderful news. Also, Ganesh, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much, Alida. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm so thrilled to actually have this discussion with you. And one quick correction: I'm not a doctor, so but
Oh,
although I like to, although I like to be at some point, but one quick note on that is like nobody in the U.S. system, most people, I would say, it's a really tough place to be a doctor or a caregiver, right? It's just
you
because the
bet.
care system is pretty broken around the world. I mean, there's access issues and everything. So nobody goes into it for any other reason than altruistic reasons, right? They want to make a difference. And I think one of the things I can tell you is like, this has been a great journey for us that I'm so inspired just meeting caregivers and folks who are impacted and inspired. Like they actually use AI to make their life just a little better, and that solves everything. So I mean, I would like to be an honorary doctor from that perspective, So
Well,
yeah.
you just got the title from me today. Awesome, awesome. Well, Ganesh, thank you so much. In spite of the busy schedule, you've taken your time to be here, and that definitely serves a purpose and tells me more about your dedication and passion for where we are talking about today. And I'm going to go straight on to our questions that we've got some very exciting, thoughts to be brought in for our podcast. And the first thing I would like to ask you, you've described yourself as someone who fuses business and technology. Can you share a bit about your journey, just growing up from Southern India to founding the company that you have right now? What's inspired you with this mission?
It's humble beginnings early on. Like I grew up in India, in Kerala, in a place called Palagat. I'm sure you're probably very familiar. And growing up, it was always like it was such an inspiring environment just in general, right? Because there is a lot of history, there's a lot of culture around how you grow up, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the things that you actually ignore and avoid as children, as a kid. Later on you learn that like how critical those things were in the way you were brought up and stuff, but you learn a lot of fundamental things of humanity, and like when inspired by Eastern philosophy all around you, right? One is like
Mm-hmm.
it's a story of resilience. It's a story of taking advantage of the opportunities handed to you. It's a story of just letting the universe work its magic, and all of that stuff, right? So my journey has been like, it's not very special, but it's like, I studied engineering as an undergrad, was a mechanical engineer because I really wanted to build cars. When
Mm-hmm.
I was then, and I enjoyed that journey. And I found somewhere on the way, I found computers, and it was initially for gaming and then programming a little bit and stuff like that. So I got into that world of computers. Never really worked as a mechanical engineer any day, but I still those fundamentals stay with you for a long time. And
Sure.
then got into the was in got into technology companies like Adaptec, Intel, Dell. Spent a lot of time in industry. For a longest period of my career, I was an engineer, software engineer, building systems and stuff like that. But somewhere around like midway, I would say I actually got exposed to like how do people use technologies. That's
Mm.
customers, the industry. I took on more business roles. I was product management and sales and general management, build out a business and so forth. And so a lot of things were right place, right time, being lucky, having the right mentors around. But I saw the opportunity where, like, look, there is a lot of amazing technology, but the technology doesn't mean anything unless it's put to use and fused into outcomes either on a personal side or a business side. So I just got so enamored on that side of the spectrum. I still remember there's a gentleman I used to work for, Ram Patel, and Ram used to tell me, and I was his, I thought I was his best engineer, and he would call me and say, like, Ganesh, what are you doing in engineering? You should be in sales. Why would I be in sales? And I'm an engineer. I'm not good enough. I'm not a good engineer. And then I learned what he was trying to tell me. I actually just called him when I haven't worked with them for over 15 years. And I think I called him a couple months ago and I told him about that. Remember, Ram used to tell me this. So I did that and I spent like 11 years at Dell. I was, where I grew up as a company, learned how to build businesses, how to build organizations, run global systems and all of that stuff. And then got the startup bug, started a company. One thing led to the other that led to a larger AI company acquiring me, or actually asking me to come and join and run their growth for them. Best job I ever had. That was a company
Mhm.
on cognitive scale. Built amazing relationships, really got to see the impact that technologies like AI can make in, like, this was early 2017, 2018. And deep learning was coming of age. There was and you automatically, you see now the pace of progress has made us stop feeling the wonder that you would otherwise feel when you see technology in action, right? Like, so my big wondrous moment of those days were things like, we were able to run Super Bowl ads for NBC Universal through a vision algorithm, and it'll tell you that if you want people to watch the ads more and buy your products, you should don't worry about that expensive actor, just put a puppy on a scene with a background of an ocean, and you'll get more bang for the buck than an expensive actor, right? Those kind of insights were like, and it was translating amazing technology to actionable business insights, right? So
Mhm.
that was the thing. And then all of this thing happened. I seen another company. I was with another company called Molecular for a few years, and then 2020 hit, and the whole world was turned upside down, right? So like, it changed everybody, and it changed how we looked at things. And for me, it was like, look, what am I going to tell my grandkids, that I help people shop more and search more with AI? Because that was what I was doing with AI. So I
Mhm.
want to do something more meaningful. I got to know. I had the opportunity to serve in Governor Abbott's task force for COVID-19 in Austin,
Okay.
and for Texas. And you see the state of, I mean, it was very inspiring in a lot of ways, but also very sad to see the state of healthcare, the data, the technology. We have all this great technology, but we don't use it well enough in the place that matters most to impact the human condition. So that was one of the, inspiring moments that, it's like, okay, I'm going to go dedicate the next 1-2 decades of my life building, how do you change healthcare with technology and AI? And so that was the origin story for Autonomize. And we looked at what can we do to make a real difference, and we realized that, look, building another point solution that solves a small problem, everybody in doing it, and they've all been doing it for the last 10 years, and hasn't made healthcare any better in the world, right?
Mhm.
We wanted to take on a much more ambitious way of thinking about this and say, look, how do we really change the way healthcare operates? How do you change the economics of healthcare, right? So care becomes accessible for everybody, it becomes seamless for patients, and it's joyful for the caregivers in the world. So I think that's the mission behind what we're doing at Autonomize.
Well, I definitely think you have a great story to share with your grandkids, and kudos to your entire journey, which is so organic and so rooted. And that's the thrill about storytelling. You know, you have something to start off from ground zero to see how you've kind of moved on forward. But and that brings us on to just what we're talking about. You know, what is the difference when you're talking about autonomizing versus automating healthcare, right? It's all about talking about AI, and they're talking about these buzzwords about automating everything. But we're talking about slightly something different where it's autonomizing it. Tell us more about that,
Yeah,
Ganesh.
look, it's a fabulous question, actually. And obviously, you can imagine I thought about it a lot before we even started this company. And I believe in two fundamental truths on how we're evolving as a civilization, right? One is, because of technology like internet and the access to information around the world, more and more impact is going to be distributed than centralized. And you can see
Mhm.
this in how we're going as a society from globalization to localization again, and all the tariff wars going on and stuff like that. So radical decentralization is a thing, right? What does that mean? What that means is, And then the other truth is actually radical automation, right? So just hyper automation, as I call it. Now, if you put this two together, pure automation is not going to move the needle for anybody, because
Mm-hmm.
pure automation means I just do what I used to do faster and quicker, right? Probably cheaper, right? But for you to really unlock value, you have to empower the edges, the distributed universe of people, because knowledge and context and workflows, especially in a place like healthcare, the knowledge is actually in the hands of the folks at the end, closer to the patient. They have
Mm-hmm.
better context than anybody in the centralized sitting in a IT organization looking at building solutions. So to empower the edges, you need to make those processes, those capabilities autonomous. And you have to make sure you capture the context in the edge and then get put that into production. It's slightly philosophical too, right? If you think about it. But I do believe that just pure automation can only get us this far. It can't go beyond this, right? And autonomizing is actually, how do you really truly make this, you know in our case, business processes truly autonomous, so it can think for the patient, it can actually think for the caregiver, it can actually make, it is not a rigid rules engine that is actually just going to break if something doesn't work. So you're trying to package as much autonomy into the systems as possible to empower the edges and make sure you don't have to have centralized decision making. You can have decentralized decision making, right? That's the idea behind autonomizing. I'll make it more practical. I'll give you a practical example of autonomizing versus
Mm-hmm.
automating, right? If you're doing, let's say, a decision making for a care plan for a patient, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we work with health plans, which is payers and insurance companies, and health providers. Well, there's a lot of back and forth that goes in back, in terms of information getting. Oh, you send this request for a prior authorization and it's missing this information. Well, when an automation is going to stop there and say, go fetch that information, or that part doesn't work, you got to make a determination on it. Automation will not solve that problem for you.
Mm.
But creating a process that's truly autonomous and say, if I don't have this information, go fetch that information. It's not in this system. Go find the other system, the information from another system. Contextualize it, package it for this need in this transaction, and make a difference, right? So it changes the way you think about these problems as well. And I believe, the whole world should be more and more autonomized to actually being to deliver the true power of what technologies like AI can do.
That's fantastic, Ganesh. I think you've made that distinction so relevant and so to the point, where replacing people with technology should be more about empowering them with intelligence that acts in real time, almost like giving the system its own adaptive intuition. And I think that's really very well positioned by your example. That brings us to another exciting factor, which is very kind of a unique proposition for your company. I see the healthcare knowledge graph, a very comprehensive system of evaluation. And tell us more about that. You're talking about building a healthcare knowledge graph, and it sounds very ambitious. Can you
Yeah.
unpack what that means, what it enables that current systems to do?
Yeah, look, I mean, healthcare, like any other industry, works in a very different vocabulary, very unique vocabulary, right?
Mhm.
I mean, you have diseases, but those diseases are coded as ICD codes or HCPCS codes or drugs that have RX gnome codes, all of that stuff. So one layer of this knowledge graph, the ideas. Now I'll give you the technical side and then
Mhm.
the philosophical side of this too, right? So one is like you have to package the vocabularies to be effective in an industry. So one is all the ontologies and how do they all link and talk to each other is very relevant, right? So you want to capture that information in a place that your AI systems, your models can actually go back as truth table and say, look, I mean, does it make sense? When I see a description of a particular, disease on a form, does that align to the ICD code? Because guess what? My payment policies and medical necessity policies are coded on payment codes, right?
Mhm.
So I want to make sure that alignment is. That's just a technical level. If it go up a level on this knowledge graph, the whole idea here is like, look, healthcare more than any other industry, it's a result of how it's one of the oldest professions in the world, right? And all the complicated ways we think about running healthcare as a business today has evolved over decades or even centuries. So there is vocabularies and knowledge pools that exist within silos within the healthcare systems itself. So if you look at the overall macro healthcare, there's healthcare and there's life sciences, and then within that there is the pharmacy operations with pharmacies and pharmacy benefit management to health plans to national health plans to regional health plans to providers to ACOs to HMOs to it just goes into these different business entities, if you will. So, and then inside of a particular health enterprise, you have the front office with the patient intake and management and things like that. You have the 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 middle office that is doing your revenue cycle management, and the back office that is doing claims and consolidation and payments and all of that stuff. There's the doctors, there's the caregivers, there's all these different folks. So
Mhm.
one of the ideas here, the big idea here is like, look, how do you combine the context in these individual silos into a place that you can truly make, you know, autonomous decisions across the enterprise, right? Again, I'll make it very practical. One,
Sure.
if, for example, health plan context or health insurance companies, there is this group called utilization management, and their role is to actually manage the utilization of medical services. So prior auth falls under that particular thing. Now, what they get is they get pages and pages of medical information to request for a medical procedure, but that information, they actually take that, use that, make a decision and stuff, and then they forget about that information. Three
Mhm.
months later, another group comes in. They're looking for care gaps to say, hey, is my entire population, who's eligible for colonoscopy, have they scheduled it and gone and make that happen? They will go and request the same information from all their providers, and they put army of people on it, looking through that information and saying, oh, there's care gaps. Let's call this patient and so forth. 6 months later, there was one of those patients who was approved a prior authorization, but it was wrongly coded on the billing. So now you have to itemize the billing code, and that the claims team will request the same information of charts from the and the provider, and they'll go look at it for DRG codes and itemized billing codes and so forth. Same information is being recontextualized for three different needs, and it's different points in time. Now imagine the experience. A patient going through a cancer treatment. They are coming in, you get a request for a prior authorization for a patient that has their medical information on it. It's a confirmed diagnosis of cancer looking for a PET scan. You can almost predict that journey of that patient over the next 6 to 8 months. Now, instead of making this whole thing as disparate different sources, if you can understand the entire patient and their medical history at that point, you understand that they have other care gaps that are relevant for their cancer treatment. Can you solve that up front? Can you predict what are the services they're going to need? You can keep them within network, give them a care navigator, make that whole journey seamless for the patient while making it good business sense to control the cost of that patient's journey, right? That is only possible if you can contextualize from that same core of data all the different nodes of context from that information. That's what this knowledge graph enables, right? So that experience that I told you, when the prior auth request hits the wire on the in the utilization management thing, the contextualization of that information, that chart is now looked at and saying, what are the codes in here? What are the care gaps in here? What is the longitudinal history of that patient? And all of that goes and fires different nodes of that particular knowledge graph. So when the chart goes to a gap analyzing team, they already have the bright insight that's saying, oh, by the way, this patient is also having this other information here. You have to go. They have, you're reviewing medications. There's comorbidities that you need to be aware of, right?
Mhm.
Those kind of unlock happens if you have a pervasive knowledge graph. And knowledge graph is a very loaded word, to be honest. Lalita, and it's been abused in the industry for so long. People think about knowledge graph as being the nodes and things. It's basically structuring unstructured, messy data into
Mhm.
a data model that you can actually then reuse across multiple context layers, right? And especially now with generative AI and being able to understand unstructured data becomes a lot easier. It's on supercharge right now. You can actually go and make this happen so much more effectively than it was before.
Absolutely. So well summarized, Ganesh, especially, considering where the United States especially is in the aspects of chronic diseases, some of the chronic diseases that we have, like diabetes and hypertension and heart disease, they're so involved that something like a knowledge graph is probably the best way to kind of catch all those silos that may not be brought to the doctor's attention. And I think you summarized it very beautifully. But this brings us back to, again, one of the primary things that we are all trying to resolve with AI coming in the forefront, which is trust, safety, and explainability. One of the major barriers for adoption is trust. Clinicians are, always worried that AI hallucinations or black box models are going to be, a concerning factor for them. How do you think the industry can build something that's more,
Yeah.
lasting in terms of confidence level with these technologies? Throw some light on that, please.
No, it's a very loaded question, as you can imagine, right? And there's, we use a approach called what we call a pyramid of trust, and the pyramid of trust is basically guard, gauge, and God gauge, and there's some other G that I can't remember. But it's basically the idea that you got to think about trust across all layers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the all layers start with like, hey, if you're using models, be it LLMs, be it agents that are built on some of these models or SLMs and so forth, how do you build in and bake in, you know, the how do you validate it in a way that it doesn't come in with biases and all of the stuff that that those are inputs into the system that you can control and make sure your data set that is actually used to fine tune or train that model doesn't have bias in it. There's debiasing techniques that you can use. There is things like you want to make sure that you understand the modality of the data that's going to go in and so forth. And I think there is that aspect of it. And then you go to the next layer, is like, look, when you actually provide a particular summary for the general AI model, providing the source documentation, source citation, where it actually came from, for the users to go have that ratify and verify what it is, right? Then you have like capabilities like we built around LLMs as judges, right? So you can have
Mm-hmm.
agents that are actually watching over and playing bad cop, red teaming agents that are actually looking at it and saying what is going wrong and stuff like that. So all of that stuff. And then on the other human trust level too, there's a few things that we do, and I think the industry should do more of, right? We use this thing called evaluator mode, which is basically, you A/B test with nurses or MDs, whoever. So we have people in the company who are nurses and MDs, and they go validate the AI model or the outputs of that, and they score that with and without AI, right? And then there is that element of actually just making sure that you're having the human feedback that actually happens that can be used for reinforcement learning or not, right? So you can actually then re-engineer your prompts if you need to, understand the gaps in the data to fine tune all of that kind of stuff, right? But all of this said and done, all the technical capabilities aside, the big thing here is trust is actually very personal for most people, right? And I'll give you, a few examples. Like one, we tout that you can actually compress the time it takes to do medical necessity reviews for health plan nurses, or reviewing visiting patient reviews, or like specialty reviews for of charts for a specialty doc, right? Initially there's always a lack of trust, and you got to assume that they're not going to trust the system.
Yep.
You won't see the gains that you want to see on day one, which is like, oh, I just could review what would take 40 minutes for me in 5 minutes. They're not going to do that. They're going to in fact take 50 minutes now, because they're verifying everything to make sure that this is actually right. So there is an element of that we have to be prepared for.
Mm-hmm.
You learn a lot. The AI also learns a lot in that interaction. Simple thing, right? For example, visiting physician, once he gets over the hump that I just want to understand this patient's cardiology history, because I'm a cardiologist, I'm going to meet them. I don't care if they have, even an oncology, this thing. I mean, I care a little bit because it's the history of present illness, or, something in there, but I don't care much about it. I just want the quickest way to understand it. So trust for them comes in, not when you give them, a 50-page summary or a 5-page summary, but the two bullets that actually tells them that this is exactly what you need to know. And that reinforcement for them is, but that knowledge of them makes them a better doc when they're actually treating that patient, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's very personal. And that part is actually often the hardest one to actually, and you have to iterate on it. So to your question on the industry, what should we do as a whole? One thing I think we should actually think about it, and it's very, it's probably controversial, right? Which is like, don't wait for perfection, but have the right guardrails, because you will learn more when the people are using it. So optimize for usage and trust. There's a lot of other things you do. We don't use AI to deny claims or any of that stuff, because the cost of failure or the cost of errors are high. The FDA doesn't allow, and the CMS doesn't allow you to do it. All of that stuff too. So there is like guardrails that are regulatorily that's already in play.
Hmm.
The more you can get this in the hands of people and then let them teach you what trust means for them, you can actually now, build something that is, longer lasting and stuff. The last thing I'll say on this topic on trust is I'm more worried about a larger problem, and I call it the complacency paradox, right?
Mm.
When AI does most of this stuff for you, people get into the habit of trusting it way too much. They fail to critically analyze it. Now, we have other AI systems that are actually being built to counter for that. But I think, that's an area, especially you know, in a place like in an industry like healthcare, because healthcare is more about care than health. It's about the human connection, right?
Right.
Now you have these systems that you're trusting in, and you still, because the patient is actually trusting you as a physician or you as a caregiver. How do you embody that, that the right amount of skepticism when you work with cutting edge AI, which is evolving every day, with enough trust in the system or in the AI to go do that and not become complacent in the process? I think that to me is a larger problem that we have to actually look and, try to figure out, whether it's training, whether it's like, active red teaming, other places to actually do that, to find those kind of scenarios to make sure people don't fall asleep on the wheel, right? Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. Especially, the newer generation that's actually becoming medical graduates, and they're actually in the forefront of where technology has taken over, quite a bit in terms of being a benefit for them. You're so dot on in terms of that complacency that needs to be addressed to. But that brings us, to this next point, where if you had a magic wand and you had to redesign something in healthcare system from scratch, where would you start? Would it be data, workflow, or culture?
Wow. That's
Good one, right?
That's a very interesting question. I got to think. You know, I don't know if from scratch is the right way to think about it, but I think, look, uh, one of the biggest things that happened over the last, I would say, almost a decade, but especially the last 3 or 4 years, is I mean, you see this in the form of digital health companies going direct to consumer. So there's a consumerization that's happening in healthcare, right?
Hmm.
The bigger thing that is going to happen, and it's going to happen right now, it's not happening the right way today, is the informed patient, right? And today, you see enough stories. You don't hear the wrong stories, but there is enough bad stories and good stories of people walking up to a doctor and saying, "Hey, listen, ChatGPT told me this is a problem here, and you need to treat it this way." And they're having it into arguments. Which, the positive thing of that is, like, now the doctor's on the edge, right? In terms, they have to be operating at the top of their license. So for them, it's like saying, okay, I need to pay attention. I need to go deep into this, and I need to explain to them. I need to be, because it's an informed patient, which is a good thing. Bad
Hmm.
thing is they still have to deal with all the junk they have to do of administrative overhead and stuff like that. So in a nice way, that also makes them adopt AI faster. That's one.
Hmm. Hmm.
The flip side of this is actually people self-diagnosing themselves using, AI, right? So I think it is the hardest. It's a hard problem to go do. But if I have to redesign this, I think we should put more focus on. I mean, you're not going to have, like, in the United States, you have 330 million people. You have less than a million MDs, or just about a million MDs, right? There's no way they're going to scale. And it takes us 10 years to produce an MD,
Yep.
right? So if you do the math on the population growth versus this, you're never going to catch up to have enough of MDs to go do it. So you have to embrace AI. You have to embrace this thing. But I think there is an opportunity. There's a finite time period of time, and it'll eventually happen anyways. But how do you double down on making the informed patient a priority for for the thing? And I like some of the Maha initiatives that are happening right now with the new administration on, empowering Make America Healthy Again and stuff like that. Some of them are complete bonkers, but these others are like, it's about informing the patient more. It's about giving them the truth to go do it. The problem is, I mean, most people don't think about health. I think, Brian Johnson says this, the most measured man on earth. You know, people don't think about health for a long time until they only think about health when something bad happens, right?
Yep.
How do you invert that? How do we make the informed consumer a priority for the society, right? And informed patient. I think giving them the tools, giving them the, making it really, really simple and easy for everybody to do it. And then the next part of that is actually how do we then help people? And it's not just a healthcare problem, change behavior, right? Because that's the hardest thing. Chronic disease management is about 70% of all cancers are preventable, right? It's about behavioral changes because we live in this high not intellectual, but high information overload era that you can't figure out, and you can't distinguish between noise and signal and what's truth versus not and so forth, right? I wish we, with all the uh, with all the fake news and all of that stuff, it's just the other side, the dark side of AI, right? It becomes harder to do. But if I were to redesign healthcare, I would actually say put the patient right in the center of it and ask the question around how do you inform them? How do you make them take care of themselves better? The conversation, healthcare is sick care today. Healthcare shouldn't be sick care. It should be conversations about longevity, conversation about quality of life, conversations about how do you live, health span, not lifespan, right? So there's all of these things that we should do a lot better. I think one thing at a time. I will slowly start fixing the system, getting like help the system evolve. And I think the huge opportunity we have in front of us is like right now the alignment of incentives. People want to live longer and healthier. Health businesses have figured out that the table the landscape is getting collapsed, so you can't do information hoarding, service hoarding, all of that stuff becomes competitive. So there is an incentive alignment to use technologies like AI across all the different stakeholders in the system. And I don't want us to miss the boat on it, if you will.
No, yeah. I mean, I think you've definitely added a lot of insight into that, and I think one way to summarize that is if we could change healthcare to become more proactive versus being reactive as it is today.
I agree.
If the patient is in the forefront and empowered to do that, I think we're on the right track. I hope you have the magic wand soon, Ganesh, so you can
We,
make a difference there.
we
Um,
all, yes.
Yes. Well, now we're on to something fun, and this is called the lightning round. And if you're ready for us, and we're kind of making it very informal, so you don't have to have the answers for everything.
Okay.
We'll try our best to kind of get all the answers, but nonetheless, if not, then we'll move on to the next. All right.
Oh, fair enough.
So one buzzword in AI that you would retire with today.
Agents.
Good one.
Very, very,
All
very,
right.
very controversial, but sure, agents. Yeah.
All right. A non-healthcare industry you think healthcare should learn from?
I think financial services, because financial services is, like take a quick. I know it's a lightning round, but a quick story.
That's all right.
It's we think about healthcare, thinks about, oh, my data is radioactive, you can't share patient data and so forth. When you walk into the Wanfujing district in China and go to an ATM doesn't have an English characters and you swipe your credit card and take $100 and walk away, you're not thinking whether my data is actually getting stolen or reused and misused, right? There is technology. We figured this out. Let's not
Yep.
try to make it. I mean, HIPAA is great, but I think it's a little onerous in a lot of ways, right? So I think we should learn from the financial services industry.
That's a great example also. Okay. Healthcare problem you're most impatient to solve.
I think the patient's experience of care. I think we just think that it's just so painful to receive care in this country,
Yep.
right?
Yep. So true. So true. And then I think you've elucidated that very well with the population not even being anything close to equal to the number of physicians that's available today. Even though we've got this huge impact of AI, we are far away from, giving that patient to physician clear proportion there. So, well, that was fantastic, and that was a great lightning round, Ganesh. I am so thankful that you are here today with us, and you could share some wonderful stories, some great examples, and make this podcast very effective. We're looking forward to having you more in this podcast and exchanging some great dialogues together. Maybe next time over, we could have it as a forum where you could bring in more people. But thank you very much. And Hikigai Studios is very thankful for your time. we are the people who are, bringing in leaders, curators, and change makers. And I think you definitely are one of them. And you know, your story definitely impacts that in many ways. And thank you once again for your time.
Oh, thank you, Lalita. Thank you so much for having me. Such a pleasure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.